work in Johnston. I'm with Facilities and Services. I've been the sustainability coordinator on campus since the summer of 2010. We've had a sustainability coordinator for, I think it was the beginning of the 2000s, like 2002 or 3 or 4 when we first got one. Since then, there's been a lot of movement in the sustainability scene, and I'm going to touch a little bit on that, but I'm really going to focus on what we're doing about renewable energy, clean energy, zero emission energy. So this is renewable, let's see if this, there we go. In 2008, our campus chancellor signed a climate commitment. There's something called the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. It was a promise to be a leader in being a sustainable campus so that we can educate the future leaders of the world by not only reducing our emissions, but also teaching them how we're doing it. So we're not just doing it, we're also telling people about it. We also signed the Governor's Compact. This is our President, Governor, and Chancellor in 2010, I believe, signing the Campus Compact. So just having some fun with, we are committed to being carbon neutral actually by 2050. And we actually wrote a 70-page document explaining how we were going to do that. This is the key figure out of the document that shows our, here's the mouse. So this is our greenhouse gas emissions, which is expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent. It's about 500,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent each year. So since 2000, we've been holding steady around there. The top line above all these colors is the projection for business as usual if we had not done anything differently. This large jump right here is the petascale computing facility. And that was a significant jump. And what we said for how we were going to reduce emissions by 2050, this number out here where it would be almost double, we're going to do things like energy conservation, renewable energy, getting off of coal is this blue sliver here, switching to natural gas. Coal to natural gas is a small component for us. Changing to net zero growth. One of the reasons why it's projected to grow so much if we had not changed anything is because we had been adding about 300,000 square feet per year over the last 15 years. It's not very sustainable. It takes a lot of energy. And so a big chunk of the reduction, the proposed reduction method was to stop growing. And I can talk a little bit more about that, although it's not related to renewable energy.
So stop growing floor space?
Yes, gross square footage. Mm-hmm. We actually have about 21 million square feet right now. And we have a policy that is in the process of approval for limiting that space growth, where in order for a building or a department to build a new building, they would have to fund the demolition of some of our old buildings. Yes, and we've accomplished that for a couple so far. I'm trying to remember. There's a plan that was approved for gathering funds for a new law building, and what they've done is they've arranged for moving out of their space, and then art and design can go into their space, and they were going to fund the demolition of a couple of small buildings so that they did have a little increase, but it was much smaller than just purely building a whole new building. Of course, they're still seeking funds, but that's the kind of thing that would really make a difference.
And is not included is in the assumption that the student population would stop growing, or that growth of the university as a population of faculty and students would stay the same?
It does not. It actually, it's really about using our space more efficiently. We have a lot of the story I hear is that we have a lot of lab space that's used as storage, or we have offices that are for retired faculty who often are not here. So there's a bit of a culture. We also have a number of faculty with more than one office because they have more than one responsibility. And so looking at, is it absolutely necessary for every person to have their own office? Can there be shared offices? Can the classrooms, for the most part, are used 9 to 5, and there are some schools that do a lot more at 8 and into the evening, and so are there ways that we can use the existing space more efficiently that way? The policy, once it becomes an approved policy, would be in the campus administrative manual, and it would be under the authority of the provost, who actually officially owns all the space on campus anyway. And so there are some buildings, we actually have a list from our antiquated deferred maintenance list building. I'm sorry, we have a number of buildings that are on the list for demolition. And so those, as they get funded to demolish, will open up a bank of square footage that would be available for other buildings to be built. But it's going to be a huge culture change to not assume that that I should get more space. And it kind of, to wax philosophical, I think it goes against the American culture of we have enough space, we can do whatever, we can spread out as much as we want. But again, not on the renewables topic, so I'll go back to this. Okay. Okay. So then we also have green buildings, which is about LEED certification, changing our building standards to enhance energy conservation. There's a little bit of emissions from transportation. The bulk of the transportation emissions are actually airfare for traveling, and the recommendation in the 2010 Climate Action Plan was to buy carbon offsets for air travel. We have not identified a funding source for paying for those offsets, but that's still the conversation underway. And then, just like there's this jump for petascale, there's this jump down, which is that in 10 years after that initial contract expires, we would seek to have any future contracts require renewable energy for that purchase. So we call that petascale offsets. And then that brings it down pretty far, but anything that's left, we would end up having to buy an offset, which is where you purchase something. For example, you would pay to maintain a section of rainforest so that it does not get destroyed and therefore sequesters more carbon dioxide as an offset. So that's the concept of these colors. And then this is 2010, I believe it's 10, maybe 8, 2008 when we signed the commitment. And these dots here are our actual emission reductions. That's our actual emissions. So we're better even than we thought we would be. And a lot of that is due to a really strong energy conservation campaign. We've been able to reduce our energy by over 20% since 2008. That's per square foot. And that it's something that it builds on itself. We took the energy savings and then used those avoided costs to pay for more energy conservation. So there's a lot going on with conservation. There is a jump here, and that's actually when the petascale building got a higher use out of the building. Because Blue Waters was going to come, and then they switched out to something else. So a lot of this is from that jump. There was also a harsher winter, which increases the energy demand, which increases your emissions, our emissions.
2014, that last dot.
I believe so. Yeah. I'm missing the, I did not put the dots in, so I'm not sure exactly where they line up. So that's the general idea, and what I'm going to talk about today is this dark blue here, the renewable energy. Do you want to ask any questions about this overview first? Yeah.
Yeah, when you mentioned offsets and you talked about buying a rainforest, has there been any like
So we have done a prairie. We have a I think it's 2.3 acre prairie at the corner of Florida and Orchard. It's one of the best prairies in the central Illinois, I believe. I've been told that. It is, and we have a couple of small, very small, like 20 square feet stands of prairie spaces. We've also been looking at increasing the use of native plants and changing from annuals to perennials for some of our flowers. But the concept of using existing space on campus would reduce the dot, and however far we can push it down with our own sequestration, our own actions, our conservation, our renewables, and things like that. That's, you know, there's a point where we think we won't be able to get all the way eliminated, in which case we would then look at buying offsets, and it's kind of the last option that we are considering. But the sequestration of carbon dioxide on campus is under discussion. We're currently actually reviewing the climate action plan. There's going to be a new version coming out probably this summer, and there's a team that looked specifically at agriculture, land use, food, and sequestration, and they are proposing a additional 50 acres of woody plantings, trees, in order to impact our sequestration. But we currently have not yet calculated what we sequester using our existing land. That's one of the to-do items. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so renewable energy. Renewables that we have been looking at and trying are wind power, solar photovoltaics, solar thermal, which is different, geothermal, biomass, and also renewable energy certificates or credits or RECs. One of the big stories is wind, and I am going to dig into the details of that because it's kind of a fun story, but we have ultimately decided not to build a wind turbine a couple of years ago. That was decided by the Board of Trustees subcommittee. Solar photovoltaics, we have a couple of examples, and we have a solar farm that's under construction now. So that's exciting for me. I hope it's exciting for everybody, but it's very exciting for me. We do have solar thermal on campus. We have geothermal at Allerton, and we do not yet have it on campus. And we're looking at biomass for the energy farm, which happens to grow it for their research purposes, and we'd like to use it then as a source. Plus, we did buy some RECs, so let's dig into it. The wind turbines. In 2003, I think I have in 2003, the Students for Environmental Concerns, sort of a student activist lobbyist group, decided that they'd like to see our campus use green power, and they initiated a fee, which is still going strong now, but it was a clean energy technology fee. And when they did their vote for the students, they said to do things like have a wind farm on campus. So that was back in 2003. Over the couple of years, they developed the idea, they got their funding, and they put $30,000 towards a wind turbine, or a wind farm. And Facilities and Services in 2005 started doing a feasibility study. The study, this was the first attempt for having renewable energy on campus, and we tend to like to repeat what we've done before, and we had not done this before, and so we really wanted to understand it before we made a decision. So we had a very, very thorough study done. It looked at noise and shadows and the air travel impacts. I'm trying to remember if that particular one covered birds, but I was thinking about animal impacts. Yeah, and it considered a number of different locations. We were talking about 3 turbines and utility scale, so 300 feet tall. The it turned out there was only one location available that was on campus land. I'm going to show you the map. And we moved forward with trying to buy one. In 2008, that one did not make it past the chancellor. We were trying to go, you have to get chancellor approval, then president approval, then board subcommittee approval, and then board approval. But that one got denied by chancellor in 2008 because we were having economic issues. Turned out then the next year we had furloughs of staff. Then in 2008 again is when we signed the climate commitment I told you about. And in 2010, the climate action plan included build 1, 2, or 3 wind turbines on campus as soon as possible. That's when I started, and so I was involved with what I call the second attempt. We did an RFP, we got a response, we got most of the funding put together, we had a grant, we were ready to go. We got the chancellor and the president to approve it, and then the board subcommittee denied it in 2011 because of a number of reasons, but the primary one was neighbor disgruntlement.
Sorry.
Mostly the neighbors didn't like it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Neighbors to the university.
Yeah, community members in Urbana, in the Urbana side. So I'm gonna, can I stand up and point here? So these are the 4 areas. So if you look way up there, loud, that is the cemetery on Florida and Kirby, okay? The rest of this is campus land that is South Farms.
Okay, so the top is south here? Or?
No, north is to the top. I can't really get it. That square is the cemetery.
Yeah, we're not.
Oh,
You know where the cemetery is?
Okay, so the cemetery is up at the top.
Yeah,
That
the
is
quad's
north.
way up there.
So we're looking way at the way south part of
Yes. This line here is Windsor Road.
Okay.
So Orchard Downs is this block, and then Windsor. And then we have really South Farms.
Urbana is off to the right, though.
This is Urbana.
Upper right.
Yes.
Is Urbana.
The city of Urbana does reach down to here. There's actually 4 sites that were considered, but the limitation was primarily the proximity to Willard Airport runways. So the Federal Aviation Administration has to approve any wind turbine, and they checked with Willard Airport, who said it needs to be at least 20,000, is that right? 20,000 feet. I think that's the right number, from the edge of their runway, which is this line here.
Okay.
So that excluded everything except D, maybe a corner of A. So we only followed, we really only focused on this corner, which is, this is Old Church, excuse me, this is Curtis, this is Old Church. Do any of you know where those streets are? And this is Philo. So it's almost the edge of Urbana. This square was on the university master plan, this square mile here, but we didn't end up buying it, so this is not university property now. So we have this block and this block, but we do not have that block. Yes, okay.
Can the university use eminent domain to get land, or is it a...
It can and it has. It didn't come up in this case. So we looked at these issues, because one of the things about a wind turbine is you do need to know how high the turbine itself will sit and how the wind will impact it. Navigant Consulting is who did our study, and they gave us a lot of information. This is the one space, this is the one spot that we really dug into at the corner of Old Church Road and Philo. One dot right there. What ended up happening is we had, because of the delay from 2008 to 2010 or 11, during that time, the energy farm got built. And the energy farm is important research that's looking at the impact of different types of biomass plants and measuring, using tiny little sensors, measuring the impact on different items in the air like carbon dioxide and oxygen and water. And it requires, in that study area up there, it requires that the land be, or that the wind be pretty much normal. And normal wind has little eddies, but wind downstream of a wind turbine is very erratic. And so if the wind were coming from this direction and pointed at the energy farm, they said that we would have to turn off the wind turbine. We would not be able to be generating electricity if the wind was from the south, pointing towards the energy farm. Then they said 15 degrees on either side just to keep that whole area protected. So we had to turn it off if it was going to be wind coming that direction. We also looked at the sound. This is decibel levels, and it's actually, what you can see here really is the medium color is 55 decibels, and the lighter color is 50 decibels. So if you're standing at the base of the turbine and it was running, you'd be able to hear it. You'd be able to hear it sort of like in a totally quiet area and then a refrigerator kicking on. You notice that kind of level. The other thing is these little yellow buildings are private homes and buildings. This is a house. This is a house with a barn and sheds, house with barn and shed. And one of the things that we were restricted to is what's called the shadow flicker. So if you were, there's actually some videos on YouTube that are great examples of shadow flicker. But if you think of this as being your living room and my arm is the shadow, and there's this thing that comes through every few seconds, there's a limitation on really how much anyone can stand of that kind of shadow happening in your home. And so we projected the shadow flicker based on total number of hours that it would hit that particular space per year. So 10 to 20 hours or 30 to 50 hours is this two colors here. 10 to 20, of course, is the lighter one. It's kind of a bow tie. Do you see it there? And what we needed was to make sure that it'd be less than 10 hours on any residence. So it's just below that yellow building. It's kind of just above this building here. And then it turned out that there's a law protecting natural habitats. So the Barnhart Prairie is a natural habitat for animals. And you can't have any shadow flicker on a natural habitat. So there's a little bit right here. So we would have to turn it off if the wind was coming from that direction, or from the
light.
Yeah. So so the shadow flicker again.
The wind was coming from a particular direction.
If it was coming from
such that it would
the shadow.
shadow.
Yeah. Again, it's this shadow. Okay.
When the Dutch built their windmills, I think in the Middle Ages, did they worry about
No comment. So then, here's the line. Oh, it was 20,000 feet. Here's the line. See this white, really light line here from the airport. So we were looking at options for locations, and we did actually consider shifting about 200 feet this way when the residents were asking about their concerns. But what that would have done is push the shadow onto these other residentials. So we decided we did not have any other location options. This was the only choice for building a turbine on our campus property. And I think, oh, and then there's this graph here. This is the wind, the expected wind production, amount of wind. And there's different speeds. I'm sorry, I don't have the metrics behind it. But basically what this is showing us is that the majority of the wind is from the south and the west.
Where you can't.
And if you overlay that, right, so we couldn't have it come from the south. Or when it was on from the south, it would not be generating electricity. Let's see what my next picture is. All right, so then we were set on the location. And we had a budget of about $5.2 million that it was made up of a grant from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, because they're great people, the Utilities and Energy Services Department on campus, which is part of Facilities and Services, the Student Cleaner Energy Technology fee, which is now managed by the Student Sustainability Committee. They had, remember, they set up their fee in support of this kind of project, and they now are collecting about $1 million a year towards campus sustainability projects. They're a very strong player in what we're doing on campus. So they were committed to $640,000. The Office of the Chancellor was offering $500,000, and the Office of the President was also going to match what the Student Sustainability Committee was going to cover of $640,000. We still needed additional money, and the president said that if the board approved it, he would take care of that. So we went ahead and went to the board, but they said no. Where did it? Oh, because they said no, there's no question. We are not doing a wind turbine on campus. It's their decision. They said no. So immediately we started working on a solar farm.
Did they say what was the reason for?
So there were a number of community members who were against the wind turbine. People who were within 1.5 miles said that the sound would keep them awake at night, which would hurt their health.
Okay.
And they put together a rebuttal to the students' arguments for why we ought to have a wind farm on campus. So the students had put together educational benefits, the visibility of our campus commitment to sustainability, the connection to research, and they included a list of classes that could use the wind turbine. And the community members who were opposed to it, they went through each one of those classes and spoke to those instructors and got confirmation that those classes would not benefit directly from the wind turbine. And they also took a look at the finances of it and recommended that rather than invest in renewable energy, that our campus should invest further in energy conservation, because energy conservation pays for itself. It was a very intense conversation with a representative from the city of Urbana, the mayor was there, and a representative from the students. It was Suhail Bharat, who was the chair of the Student Sustainability Committee, and they both gave their perspective, and then the subcommittee made their decision. I was not actually in the room, but because the wind turbine was canceled, we immediately started working on a solar farm. So this was initiated in May of 2011. And what we did was we identified a location where there was about 20 acres of land that we could put photovoltaics on the ground, because that's the cheapest method of installing it. And we also, having learned from the wind turbine project, we put this out as a design, build, operate, maintain RFP. So we ended up, and it's now approved and underway, we ended up funding a company to do the entire designing it, building it, and operating and maintaining it for 10 years. So the university just pays for whatever power it produces. We buy all of the power that comes from it, and we keep all of the renewable energy credits that are associated with it. And here's the budget for the solar farm. There's funding from our energy rates, the way that we budget our energy costs, to allow for $4.25 million in support of the solar farm over the next 20 years, actually, because it's a 20-year life. And the Student Sustainability Committee contributed $1.05 million, which is actually quite a bit more than what they were going to contribute to the wind turbine. But it's approximately a quarter of the cost. And this cost is the difference that we're paying more than conventional electricity. So the total cost of the solar farm is actually a little over $15 million, but we anticipate that the amount of electricity it's providing to us will offset our electrical costs by 10. The difference is the 5.3. And I'll put them next to each other here. There we go. So when we compare the solar farm and the wind turbine, the solar farm has this 5.3 subsidy, but it covers all of the operation, maintenance, and the connection to our electrical grid, and there are no additional costs. With the wind turbine, that was the price to buy it and install it, but we had not yet identified all of the connection costs and operation and maintenance costs. So very similar price, except the wind turbine is maybe not including all of the maintenance, or it's certainly not including the maintenance over time. The solar farm is actually 5.87 megawatts, and the wind turbine was going to be 1.65. The solar farm, because there's different rates of capacity factors based on the different technologies. So you get a megawatt of nameplate capacity, and that then translates using the capacity factor and the hours per year to a kilowatt hours per year. And so then we take the kilowatt hours per year and compare it to our total demand, which is in kilowatt hours per year. So the wind turbine was 0.8% of our total electrical demand. That's with having to turn it off in those cases. And then the solar farm should be about 2.1% of our electrical demand. So it's a much better deal. The wind turbine was designed and built, they were going to install it, and then we'd have to do the rest. The solar farm is the power purchase agreement where they are doing everything on our land and we're buying the power. Also, the wind turbine really did have a lot of community resistance, and the solar farm has not had any. We've reached out to the community, the people who live on First Street that is near where the solar farm will be, made sure they're aware of it, gave them an opportunity to ask questions, and nobody's asked anything. It's just, so that's the end of the solar farm conversation. Would you like to talk about that a little bit? Any questions?
Were they going to use it for classes?
We're going to focus the solar farm only on production needs for campus. During the first 10 years, this power purchase agreement is with the vendor, and they are responsible for doing everything. They may be willing to work with us in classes, and they certainly have already said that they'll offer tours. But we're doing educational efforts through the ECE department and the business instructional facility, and then there's research at the Building Research Council. So we're kind of keeping it separate as a utility system. The answer is basically no.
So you mean the rooftop solar in the new ECE building,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have data from that available for students to
Yeah.
use and look at?
Yeah. So actually, I was going to get into some of our existing on-campus. I'll jump to the next page. Oops,
Who owns
picture.
the solar panels that will be out by First Street? Is the university or does this company?
The company owns them for the during the agreement timeframe,
Oh, but
and then the
they-
university will own it afterwards.
Oh, okay.
And they're warranted for 20 years. The power purchase agreement is limited to 10 because of state law. So we front-loaded all the costs into the first 10 years, and then we'll only have to do the minor maintenance for the second 10 years. Plus, we have warranties on the inverters, because that's really the main maintenance need for a solar farm.
And the university will actually own the solar panels after the 10 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the life of the project is, we've been communicating it, and we got the approval based on a 20-year lifespan. And the 15 million and the 5.3 million, all of that is based on the 20-year lifespan. But our researchers on campus, the people who research solar photovoltaics, tell us that it's very likely that those panels will last 40, even 50 years. And so that's not accounted for in the cost of the project. So this is the business instructional facility. This was actually our first solar rooftop installation. And it's a small array, it's 33 kilowatts. But it's been useful for getting us at facilities, used to the idea of having solar and renewables. It's been useful in communicating our desire to be more green oriented and more sustainable. It has been used in a number of classes. There are senior design classes that have downloaded the data from this, which we can provide, I think, in 15-second intervals, and done analysis for their classrooms. That's the initial project for renewables on campus. But now, in addition to the solar farm, we have the electrical and computer engineering building. I don't have a picture of that one, but that is supposed to have, it's aimed at 300 kilowatts on the roof of the existing building, and then another 1.2 kilowatts on the parking deck that's at University and Goodwin. That parking deck is not yet funded, so if you know anybody who wants to give us money for solar panels, tell me and I'll connect them to the people looking for the money there. But together, once those both are installed, then the ECE building will be a net zero energy, they're calling it, building, which is something that I know UNI's looking at doing some net zero energy classrooms, if they can get some solar on their roof. And it's something that we're looking towards the future about energy conservation, is driving the demand down to zero, cumulative over a year. The ECE building for the rooftop, they were actually funded for a portion of their rooftop panels by the Student Sustainability Committee again, and it is designed, it was built into the building, and it's designed for classroom use. A number of our roofs on campus are not accessible to the public. They don't have wheelchair accessibility, and they don't have safety guardrails. But the ECE building has an area of the rooftop that was specifically aimed at classrooms using and having access to the solar panels. I was up there the other day, it was great. They haven't put the panels in, but they have initiated the purchase order. They should be going in the next couple months. For ground-mounted PVs, the Building Research Council has I think it's a 14 kilowatt array that is just a piece of the research for the Smart Grid Research program, and how solar would tie into that. They got a grant from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and installed that, I think it was a year and a half ago now, or a year ago. So we've got a component that is for education, a component that's for research, and then the solar farm is really primarily utility scale, just increasing our renewable usage.
Where is the Building Research Council? Where is that?
It's just south of the waste transfer station. So there's St. Mary's Road, and if you were to go south from, if you turn onto St. Mary's Road from Neal Street and take the first south street, it's not Oak, it's the one right before that.
So maybe near that Amarin, they're doing all the smart grid stuff.
It-
Remember we went
it's-
there once?
Yeah, it's in that neighborhood, but it's a different building. But you can see, I mean, there's a fence around it, but you can walk up to the fence and look at the panels there. Also, I was going to mention they have solar panels at Allerton now that are built by students through classes. The learning and community classes worked with Allerton to install those. One thing about the business instructional facility is that it was our first LEED certified building, which is trademark of the U.S. Green Building Council. And we have been working hard on increasing the number of LEED buildings. We actually have, this is the square footage for each year.
This is added each year, right?
How much is added each year? Yeah, sorry.
This is, it's like, what's going on?
New, yeah. I'll need to add that word. And we actually have, I guess there's 10 certified LEED buildings on campus now. 3 of them are platinum, and we have 10 more in the works. So we're becoming very, we have a lot of LEED certified buildings. Well, one of the most recent ones was Bowsfield Residence Hall, which is at the corner of First and Peabody. And they contributed some funds towards the renewable energy certificates we got in order to qualify for one of the LEED points for using green energy. So the solar farm and the wind turbine were all efforts in getting us to 5% renewable. And our goal was to have 5% renewable electricity by FY15, which is this year. And of course, neither of those are installed at this point. And so we ended up buying the renewable energy credits. Yes, George?
I was going to say that LEED certification and floor space added leads me to think, what does it take to maintain LEED certificate? Once you have it, you probably have to apply again later, right? Or is it, it's not in perpetuity?
Well, so the initial version of LEED, the initial versions of LEED did not require follow-up.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know which of our buildings maybe have gone into the newer version that does require that. There is something called LEED Existing Building Operation and Maintenance, which we have not instituted on our campus yet. The renewable energy certificates are, we bought 20,000 kilowatt hours for this year. And we made sure that we were buying them from our local regional area, so they're MISO, but then we wanted them to be certified, so they're National Green E certified, and we weren't, we were looking at what percentage is that if you count petascale or don't count petascale. So we have that on there as, it's 5.28%. If you don't count petascale, it's only 4.25% if you do count petascale. If we had the solar farm online in December, it would have been able to bring it up for including petascale to 5%. The total cost was $27,000. This was the first time we bought these RECs. And we've had a number of conversations about what do we really think about RECs? Because if you're buying a REC, it's just a certificate. But you have to have a REC in order to claim you're using clean energy. With the solar farm, we're keeping all the RECs. We don't have to go through a certification process because there's no possibility that the electricity would be used by somebody else. But if you buy renewable energy from elsewhere, you have to buy the REC along with it, or they could sell it twice, right? You have to make sure that you own the REC. So we've had a number of conversations about RECs in general, and I think that's still an interesting dialogue for our campus to have. I'll get into it a little bit more when I look at going forward. Buying this 20,000 megawatt hours, 20,000 RECs got us on the radar of the EPA's Green Power Partnership. they reached out to us and said, hey, we heard you bought these RECs. You are now qualified to join our Green Power Partnership. And so, so we filled out the paperwork, and we looked at a calendar year. You have to submit a year at a time. And so we submitted the calendar year of 2014, which is not how normally we report in fiscal years on campus, but we didn't, the way that the RECs came in, we wanted to do the calendar year. And so if you add in the renewables from the BIF solar array and you don't count petascale, we got to 6%. So this is our partnership profile with the EPA's Green Power Partnership.
When are you allowed to count and not count the petascale?
It's an ongoing discussion. When we signed the climate commitment, that applies to it's adjacent property that we have operational control over. And petascale is a collaboration with the National Science Foundation. And so there's differences of opinion of whether we really have operational control or not. And that's not a facilities and services decision. And so we haven't been told for sure one way or the other, so we offer both pieces of information. Does that make sense? I think the 5%, when I read the Climate Action Plan from 2010, the 5% renewable electricity did not apply to petascale because the goal for petascale was to do the offsets with the next contract. So I believe our 5% aim does not include petascale. But I also believe, this is me, I also believe that we should include it, and that with the next revision of ICAP, we should not separate it out. We should just count it as part of our campus because it's part of what we do. So that will possibly get resolved with the next version of the Climate Action Plan. So what are we going to do next? One of the things that was under discussion a couple years ago and is continuing to advance is entering into a wind power purchase agreement. The solar farm is a special kind of power purchase agreement where we lease them our land and they build on our property, and then we buy all the power and we have an agreement that describes all the details of that arrangement. A wind power purchase agreement that we're looking at would not be on our space. It would be purchasing wind power from a wind farm in our region, somewhere in MISO preferably, or the Midwest at least. And we could get our 5% electricity over the next 10 years through a 10-year power purchase agreement for wind power. We have just started digging into the details of how do we decide if and how much. We already buy electricity ahead of time through hedge purchasing. This is just one slide out of a number of different details behind the wind power purchase agreement. And I thought this one was kind of fun, so I wanted to bring it as my example. If you look at this is about 15 months of a year, so more than a year. So this is probably December to December. Can't quite read that. Yeah, this is January and February. This is the amount of electricity that we buy on campus and how it changes over time. And this is by month. We buy some of it in a block. The green is, there's two lines here, and one is taller, that's the total amount we need. And the lower part is the off-peak, and the higher part is the peak, which is the heat of the day, weekdays. And then the second line, the one next to it where it's about half, is what we buy in advance. So what we buy in advance, we actually can buy in blocks for just the time that is the heat of the day, just weekdays, peak hours. So we have this process in place for pre-purchasing electricity to make it a more even rate and to keep the price more stable for ourselves. Buying a wind power purchase agreement would change our process as far as the pre-purchasing, because when you enter into a wind power purchase agreement, you're buying whatever those turbines produce whenever they happen to produce it, which is it's actually typically opposite of this. It's higher in the winter months, lower in the summer months, and it's also higher at night and lower during the peak of the day. So we're looking at a wind PPA in order to have clean energy and locked in prices over the next 10 years, but we're evaluating how that would impact our purchasing process and how much we can agree to buy without causing issues with our operational production at the power plant on campus. And so this is still, we've gone pretty far with learning what the options are and what the pricing would be, but we are currently going through the process of identifying how to decide what's an appropriate amount to get. Mm-hmm.
Can you explain how the power plant on campus works? Is it owned by campus?
Yeah.
And it's coal-fired?
It's a cogeneration coal and natural gas plant. It also could use fuel oil if we had to. We keep some on backup in case there's an emergency. Yeah, so.
There's a strange story about that. Maybe you know it. I don't know the details, but years ago, it was coal, period. And then they switched it to some kind of oil.
Mm-hmm.
Then came the oil crisis, and they switched it back to coal. Is that true? I was here, but I didn't follow that. It seems like an expensive thing to do.
Yeah, I don't know about the oil, but I know that in the 80s, at the beginning of the 80s, we did not have any coal boilers. There weren't any. And we added them in support of our Southern Illinois economy in the 80s. Now what we have is we have enough natural gas boilers to produce the heating needs for campus during the summer months, but we don't have enough of natural gas equipment or assets to provide all the steam requirements we have during the cold of the winter. So we have to burn coal right now in order to meet our heating needs for the winter months. We've gone 3 years without burning coal in the summer. So that's our first step towards not burning coal. And we're in the process of a utilities master plan that's looking at, for the next 35 years, all the way to 2049, what different machines, or that's the wrong phrase, assets is the word we use, different boilers and generation equipment should we have at Abbott Power Plant. So there's a few different scenarios of how we can move forward, and actually in a couple of months I maybe could come back and share what's going on with the master plan. We're trying to get a final version that's ready to go out and share. There's actually George, you had asked, how's it work? We own Abbott Power Plant, and we have district heating and district cooling. And the district heating is the steam tunnels you see everywhere that goes to a lot of our buildings to provide the heat in the building. Some of it then goes through the building as steam, some gets converted to hot water, some gets converted to forced air in the buildings. And then we have district cooling, which is called chilled water. And we've been slowly increasing the number of buildings that are on the chilled water loop because it's more efficient than air conditioners. And then we have, because we're making steam anyway, we run the steam through a steam generator to make electricity. So by making the steam, we're automatically, sort of as a byproduct, getting electricity. And we get about half of our electricity through that cogeneration system. And then we purchase the rest of the electricity. So we buy about half and we make about half. The power plant, the electricity that we get out of the power plant has a carbon footprint basically of 0.8 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilowatt hour. But the grid electricity is more like 1.6 pounds. So when we can make it ourselves through the cogeneration, we're actually reducing the carbon impact than if we just bought it all directly. In addition to being very highly efficient. It's over 90% efficient because of the dual cogeneration process. We're really best in class for a power plant, and we're looking at, there's new EPA requirements that are coming out, but we already meet those. There are peer institutions who are looking to mimic what we're doing now. So we still want to look at how do we further reduce emissions and how do we increase renewables. But the evaluation of our power plant is really A+, I believe. I would give it an A+ based on what they said. Yeah.
More about the steam heat and sort of, I mean, none of the new buildings are using the steam heat, right? And so what, you know, I mean, is it, obviously, you know, a lot of people want to go to like a geothermal type of plan, but I mean, how efficient is the steam heat versus some of the, I mean, the BIF has, it's not steam heat, right?
So I know that in the building, BIF is forced air.
Okay.
But I believe that it still receives that heat through the steam tunnels.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure. I'd have to check. I know that there was a study recently, and I don't have the details of it, but we were looking at would it be better to use geothermal or our district heating and cooling systems for some facilities in like to the south of Florida. And it came back that it was much more efficient to stick with our central district heating and cooling system. Part of the conversation about geothermal is it depends on your actual geology, I mean. And so we are, in the master plan for the utilities, energy and production and distribution, we are reviewing the different kinds of clean energy technologies that are out there. One of the issues that comes up with geothermal, and I don't have the details very well yet, but is that with geothermal, you still have to have a lot of electricity. There's pumps that are run through electricity. And so the question of, at the large scale, that transition, is that the right way to go, is an open question. Yeah, there's an efficiency line about how much are we losing in steam, because we know how much we send out of Abbott. And I'm trying to remember if I know the number. It's not terrible. I know that. I just don't remember if it was 80% efficient, 80 to 90. It was in there. Just comparing the amount of steam that we put into the system and the amount that we use at the buildings. So the losses are not high. Yeah. Anything else? I think this was my last slide. Yeah, so we're updating the climate action plan and working on the energy master plan, and in the meantime, just turn off the lights. Please turn off the lights.
Lights aren't a major contributor, though, right?
Well, turning off the lights builds the culture of sustainability.
Right.
And we really do need to build that culture. You know, the difference between buying used furniture from Restore versus a brand new piece of furniture that got shipped from another country, it's an attitude, it's a way of life. I'm going to get too philosophical.
Another question just with regard to the chilled water. So, and I can't remember the name of, you probably know them. It's another one of these acronyms, but they do energy audits.
CDAC.
Commercial, what's it? CDAC,
Mm-hmm.
that's right. So
Smart Energy Design Assistance Center.
So I was talking to someone from there, and
Yeah.
basically they said that they, you know, because they're doing energy audits all over the place, and they said that you know, because I just sort of assumed that, okay, newer buildings are going to be, in general, more efficient than older buildings, and they said, no, that's not true at all. And then we talked specifically about cooling, and they said that often the window air conditioner unit is the best choice for cooling. Not that it's more efficient, but that users use it better, and so. For example, it's loud and it's right there and you know when it's on, and you know how to use it, so you turn it on only when you need it and then you turn it off. And they said that these you know, central air conditioning systems fail, and they fail in a way where they sort of fail open, like basically the vents fail open.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were talking about, and that basically it's invisible, and so when no one knows that this has happened, and then you're just sort of
Wasting energy.
So I just wonder, like, I mean, I just thought a lot about heating and cooling specifically with you, and feeling like it's hard to monitor, hard for the building users to know.
Yeah, so as a whole on campus, we're moving to digital controls, and when we go in and do a retro-commissioning project in one of the buildings, we've done about 60 retro-commissioning projects so far, or different buildings. When we go in and do that, they add occupancy sensors, and they use the same occupancy sensors that people think of those as being for turning lights on and off, but we use it for our HVAC system.
Is this a CO2 sensor, or it's a motion
There
sensor?
are different ones in different places,
okay.
but I think the current one is a CO2 sensor. The occupancy sensors, then when they're tied to the digital control center, we can see if there is a failure, and they get an alert before the occupants would notice.
Okay.
And we can also we can set the scheduling to turn down when there's fewer people in the room. It can adjust because one of the things that was brought up a lot last week, we were doing a lot of energy conservation talks, and the question kept coming up, shouldn't we fix our windows? The windows in this building are terrible, and they've got to be a bad energy loss. And but the answer was that actually no, the indoor or the outside air intake, OAI, something like that.
Right.
The bringing in the new fresh air is really the biggest loss. And so replacing the windows, while it feels, you feel it a little more directly, it's not as high of a payback as you would expect, because the majority of the air loss is through the outdoor air intakes. And so the occupancy sensors tying to the HVAC system is one of the best ways to reduce that potential loss from inefficiencies in the cooling and heating system that you were talking about. There's actually, with the direct digital control center, they can see the machines, and they can see what's turning and how fast it's going, and all that from a computer room at the physical plant.
This is managed all from FNS. This is not
through
managed at a building level.
Right. We've had in the past some energy liaisons, and we were talking about energy maintenance managers.
Oh, okay, like
Yeah, where somebody who's an existing staff person would take on an additional role, just to, be a point of contact for the energy use in that building. It's one of the ideas that we have that could be in the next climate action plan. Yeah.
I have a couple of quick questions. So it sounds like there's per room control,
Yeah.
which a lot of times nowadays there's not the existing systems, which seems very efficient.
Yeah.
But do the people in the room have any override control? Like, if the system says you guys are comfortable and we're all burning up, is there any way to bump it up?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah. There's thermostats in the individual rooms, and there's also one of the things about the scheduling, just kind of along those lines, is what you do is you say, okay, in this conference room, we don't ever use this after 4 o'clock on Friday. So then it will shut down to not completely off necessarily, but very minimal airflow. Based on you saying that nobody's here. And then if you're going to be in the room, then you can plan ahead and ask for it to be bumped up before you get there, or the occupancy sensors can kick on, like we just heard them kick on, to update what's going on in that particular room. But your thermostat still has control over it.
I think we have one of these rooms, the conference room in Mechanical Engineering Laboratory.
Okay.
On the weekends, it's off, and sometimes we'll schedule an event. We'll go, and in the summer it's really hot, and in the winter it's really cold, and we have to call FNS.
No, it'll turn on when you first go in.
It doesn't.
It's not?
No. And in fact, we have to call. Is there something we can do about that?
Yeah, I don't think you should have to call.
Okay. Because we've done that, and actually people have come out sometimes to turn it on for us.
Like, isn't one of the new rooms without the sensor?
It is, and it has one of those, little individual thermostats in the room and things like that.
Yeah, give me your contact info and I'll see what I can do about that. Because the theory behind it is that it would kick on because you walked in.
Okay.
So if it's not, if you're calling and you're basically calling the service office saying it's too hot, right? So then they send out a technician to turn it up, but it sounds like it needs an engineer to fix the root issue.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
So let me follow up with that one.
And they know people are in the room because of CO2 sensors, did you say? So your breath increases the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, or how do they do it? How does the CO2?
Your breath increases every time you breathe out, you're adding CO2.
Yeah, but it's got to be pretty sensitive, right? So
I think it's all.
I
feel like it's also temperature.
If it's 70 parts per million in the regular atmosphere, when we're in here, how many parts per million?
You can get, because, Ty Noel, so like he carries his sensor around with him everywhere. And actually the people from CDAC do too.
Yeah.
And it's pretty remarkable, because I had them come to my class.
And show the difference?
Like, as the people come in, the kids come in the room, you really see it go up. And I can't remember what the cutoff is for like where you start getting really sleepy and unproductive, but we definitely hit that. Yeah.
Because of the number of people in the room, the CO2 production sends it up to.
That's cool. We should get that on a. We should get that on a website, because we do. I mean, we have these sensors, and I wonder if they're connected to an internet site.
Right. Yeah. Then the teacher can monitor the number of students sleeping through lecture.
CO2 sensors are fairly inexpensive.
It's not my fault I fell asleep in the lecture. It's everyone else's fault.
I would love to do one actually, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd like to have one.
High school.
That's
I
fascinating.
have dissolved us now.
Thank you so much.
You are most welcome. Thank you.